About to convene. It's our intention to conduct this meeting with the courtesy and decorum that's expected of us as representatives. We ask you to please help us attain that goal. This morning we will start with Representative White and his House Bill 285. Representative, go ahead when you're ready. Better have a roll call first.
Chairman Lant.
Here.
Vice Chair Dohrman.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Representatives Bratton, Burns,
Here.
Raker,
Here.
Gosen, Hurst,
Here.
Kelly, Lynch,
Here.
Smith, Walker.
Present. We have a quorum. Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for hearing the bill today. I'm Representative Bill White. I represent the 161st District in Joplin. This bill came about as a result of our 2011 tornado in Joplin. Everybody's pretty aware of it. A lot of people in this room behind me and in front of me were down helping us in Joplin after the fact. We ran into a scenario where we lost a lot of housing, about 4,000 low-income housing units. Now, these weren't all MHTC housing units by any means. These were the old type of low-income housing you have in a town the age of Joplin. Some of them were small miners' houses, some of them were small apartments dating from just after the turn of the century. With our MHTC low-income housing tax credits, we got back 355. That is not enough. We still have a low-income housing problem. The problem is that 355 low-income housing units could have been and would have been more. When we had our bidding going on for the MHTC housing, well, first of all, I'll say it required prevailing wage. We'll talk about it in a second. But the MHTC had specified the wrong prevailing wage criteria, and so they extended the bidding a month, and for everybody to go back and reuse the new wages. Well, I can tell you what happened when those wages went up for the prevailing wage. The number of units went down on the new bids, the number of quality went down on the bids, and the preferred type of housing went down. It became less preferred in my own opinion. What I want in my community are single family housing units. Then I go down the list: duplex, quadplex, apartments that you've got to down at the end. You have to build a much better sense of community with single family housing. These things, with this increase in prevailing wage, let alone the requirement of prevailing wage, all three items went down in a negative direction, in my opinion. Okay, why is prevailing wage there to begin with? First of all, MHTC housing has not required until 2010 prevailing wage. Actually, we started doing low-income housing tax credits in 1990. Was never applied until 2010 during the Nixon administration when Treasurer Zeifold was the chairman, and it was added in 2010. 2011, we have across the state, Joplin being the largest of the disasters. We had many disasters. It highlighted the problem that all of a sudden you have low-income housing requiring prevailing wage. Why is it a problem? Well, low-income housing tax credits don't qualify for anything about prevailing wage. First of all, the Supreme Court of the United States and the Missouri Supreme Court have both held that tax credits are not considered a government expenditure. You all on this panel, and I'm sure most people behind me, if not all of them, understand how tax credits work. Money never comes into the government. This is credits that we are giving legislatively before money ever comes in. So both Supreme Courts have said this is not a government expenditure when considering things that require government expenditures, both Missouri and the U.S. Supreme Court. Second, it doesn't meet the definition of what a public works project is. This is not a public thing. These are private individuals, private companies building housing with tax credits for private individuals. Nothing about this is a public work. You look at the definitions of public work, it does not fit anywhere in the picture. So the reason, in my opinion, this was done was to make some people happy. some supporters happy. And had we not had a statewide series of disasters, and primarily Joplin, we had St. Louis, we had flooding on both the rivers, had a tornado in Sedalia. Had the disaster year not occurred right after this, it probably would have gone on. People wouldn't have even noticed hardly that you had prevailing wage. Now, in a lot of places, in larger cities, I would venture to guess that a vast majority of the low-income housing bids that are put in, probably, if they're union wage, they're going to be a prevailing wage. Might be a little higher than prevailing wage. So it may not have been as, if the issue, may not have come to the forefront had we been predominantly in the two cities where the great majority of these housing occurs. So I wrote many letters for companies, and I can tell the people, this is not the idea of we get into what prevailing wage is, and isn't the idea is to protect local workers. A lot of the bids, we have off this topic, but we built our high school down, we did a lot of rebuilding in Joplin. A whole lot of those people are not local companies and they're not local workers. They're brought in from out of state because they got bids for low-income housing for schools, et cetera. So with these low-income housings, I wrote the letters for these people after they answered questions for me. I had a whole page of them. That's why I can say, I just know, well, numbers were there because you'd see the numbers change when they had to resubmit their bids. Quality is because I asked questions. They have a sheet of pages. Most of you know I'm kind of a green Republican. We had bids that initially were insulated concrete form housing. That is tornado-proof, pretty much housing. We had housing with good insulation, above standard. We had lots of good quality housing, high U factors in windows, et cetera, et cetera. When those bids came back in to try to recoup that additional cost that was going out for labor, those things went down. You know, window ratings got worse. They became cheap windows. And low-income housing that is not energy efficient isn't really very low-income housing because those people have to pay the utility bills. And why is this important? Again, we talk about the quality of the housing that was left. My daughter had rented, well, I would guess it was probably made in the 1920s, maybe. It was a building with 6, 7 apartments in it, 2, 3-story. She rented it before the tornado. A couple of years, it was like $250. That building was not destroyed in the tornado. It was not a place I would have wanted to have lived, but it now rents for over $400 a month. When you have scarcity in any commodity, including housing, it goes up. Our Attorney General did a good job of looking for people doing immediate price gouging, but it doesn't take very long to up rents and not have it be considered a price gouge. So we still today, the problem we have most in my town is we do not have enough low-income housing. This exacerbated requiring prevailing wage on low-income housing in disaster zones. This bill is exactly that. Only in governor-declared disaster zones does this ban the use of prevailing wage. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Representative Webb? Go ahead.
We've seen this bill before, so
It's true. Got off the floor last year, yeah. Didn't go anywhere in the Senate.
and hopefully expect about the same path this year.
We hope not.
First off, in general, this will apply to sort of all the, since you're going first, all the prevailing wage bills. I think it'll make all of our dialogue a lot simpler if we all agree on certain things. And one of the first things that I want to make sure we agree on is that this really is about wages and about, and you agree that.
No, I do not agree that it's about, this is about low-income housing, and it's affected by.
Right, but you talked about
capricious wage sets.
Prevailing wage is about wages. And so with the prevailing wage law, workers get paid more for the work they do, and without a prevailing wage law, they get paid less for the work they do. We can debate the value of that, but we agree with that general principle, don't we?
If it's a public works project, it requires prevailing wage, yeah.
Right, which is higher, which means the workers make more money
than
without a prevailing wage law.
In most cases, yes.
Okay.
I would say not across the board, no. There are, yes, indeed, there are
Okay.
contractors. Well, one, union contractors may pay their people more than prevailing wage. In a particular, if their time and grade, how their union pay scales work, they may actually pay more on a prevailing wage job than is required. A private contractor that has really good, stonemasons, we have some pretty good construction companies down there that pay their people well.
But as a general rule, you agree that for this, and I don't want to jump ahead, there's a bill about schools and it talks about cost savings. The cost savings that they're talking about in that bill, the cost savings that you're talking about, which would you say would lead to more housing units, those cost savings come from reducing the payments to workers.
I would say that in this bill, they come by applying an appropriate wage scale to them, yes.
Which
Because
reduces their pay.
if we were to, well, it does not reduce their pay if they wouldn't get it. This doesn't qualify as prevailing wage. If this bill's about schools, if this bill's about building a highway, those are prevailing wage under the statute right now.
Right.
But those require prevailing wage, so I would agree, if you don't have prevailing wage on building a road project, you may, I will say may, because again, it depends on your contractor, have lower wages paid.
But the only way that you solve the quote problem that you're asserting here is, which is that they can't build as many housing units, is.
Right.
Well,
I will totally say the
reducing
pay scale requiring prevailing wage on this project caused us to have less housing built. Yes, absolutely.
I want to be clear, we're talking about the same thing. The other issue that so that you and I have a fundamental disagreement on prevailing wage, and we'll set that
I'm not sure we really do.
No, we do.
This bill is different than your other bills you're hearing.
Well, so let's talk about that. The other component, and I understand that what happened in Joplin was absolutely horrible, and I know it affected you personally and in a lot of different ways. I mean, it was just bad all around. But you have to agree that this bill doesn't just apply to Joplin.
This bill applies to disaster areas.
Right.
Government declared disaster areas.
What are most of those areas? Why are most of those areas declared disasters?
Natural disasters. They
What
come in all shapes and sizes.
The majority of counties?
Wind, water, lightning, ice, floods.
You haven't hit the main one yet. What's the main one? There's one that overwhelmingly dominates Missouri. Droughts.
If they're declared disaster.
Right, and then in most counties in the state of Missouri, which are declared disasters, are because of droughts. But droughts don't affect the structural integrity of buildings, do they?
Drought can affect the need for low-income housing, absolutely.
Okay, but not.
This is about low-income housing. This is, in drought, if you don't have a job, you have an increased demand for low-income housing.
More often than not, the criteria for your bill, while Joplin may be the face of it, more often than not, it will be applying to areas that are a disaster area because of a drought than because of a tornado.
This is MHDC low-income housing tax credits.
Right.
If there's not a demand for low-income housing in a drought area, then they're not going to be getting requests in for low-income housing to be built in disaster. You've got to make, this is a private, these are private.
They build them everywhere.
They build them everywhere.
Not just after tornadoes. They're building them in Columbia right now.
In disaster areas, in floods, in probably earthquakes, in tornadoes, they need more low-income housing because it's been destroyed. In a drought, you may need more low-income housing because there may be a whole lot more low-income people. Not that the housing went away, but now there is low-income housing people there.
Let me ask one more quick question, and then I'll be quiet. Okay, so we've got, let's say Boone County, let's say my county. We've got a low-income housing unit that's being built, and HDC tax credits are being involved in it. It is a year-long project. 6 months into the project, if we were declared a disaster area because of the drought, got nothing to do with anything other than lack of rain. Do we switch and all of a sudden prevailing wage doesn't have to be paid anymore?
Contract's already been awarded. Now, okay, you're
Okay,
saying
you're saying prevailing wage doesn't have to be paid anymore. So do we change that?
The bid was submitted and the tax credits were already put out. They're building to the spec they gave the MHTC people.
Okay, but the law,
that would be interesting. I'm sure that as you and I are both lawyers, we would probably find some enterprising young lawyers to say, well, gee, we can take this to court and argue one way or the other.
I think you probably could.
It's possible.
Okay, so I mean,
my own personal opinion would be, hey, if you're now in a disaster area,
the contract
would agree with you, if they would or not, I can't say.
The contract would be, you would get the credit from the MHTC, but
MHTC, the tax credit's been given.
I think you could change the rate you're paying your employees.
You got a contract with them.
Maybe.
You know, you might. I mean,
you might not. Depends on who's doing it.
Yeah, I think you have a dim view on how
you see what I'm saying about how
presenting this image that contractors, oh gee, I have a job now, let's go out and
hire
I'm saying
you're changing
people off the street.
You're changing the law arbitrarily in the middle of the project.
Well, if you would like to consider an amendment that says that a change in the middle, I'm sure it could be debated, and I would love to discuss it with you, that you'd like to say, if a disaster is declared in the middle of a project, that you wouldn't want the wage changed, or that you would want the wage changed, I would like that one
But
better.
it doesn't apply to, I mean, it doesn't apply to.
No, it totally can apply to droughts. This is about the need for low-income housing. That's what this bill is dealing with. It's a disaster zone, and if you need low-income housing, if it's a disaster caused by, MHDC grants these things. We had a lot more requests than got approved.
Most of the state gets declared disaster zone at some point.
But how much MHDC housing is your county gonna
A
request?
lot. We have a lot in my county.
It doesn't mean they're going to get it. They have to show that they need it. The fact that you're going to ask for MHDC housing doesn't mean that you automatically get it, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That'd be free.
Inquire, Mr. Chairman. Representative, would you give me the numbers again on how much low-income housing was there prior to the tornado and how much you replaced it with, or the town replaced it with?
We lost about 9,000 housing units, approximately 40, or about 4,000 of them would be low income. Again, these weren't low income housing, buildings. These weren't, some of them were apartments that got ran over that were low income housing, but a lot of them was just old housing that you seriously could rent for $250. We had a lot of scenarios where people didn't even have insurance on. These were old mining houses from
We have
the
those,
century days.
all small communities have.
And when you're making minimum wage, it's hard to, you can't afford $400 or $500 a month rent. You can't do it. And so they were living in these places for $250, and they were older structures. And the tornado could have hardly drawn a better path, maybe one more little hook to take out our low-income housing, the older sections of town with those smaller, older, 100-year-old plus housing, basically.
And so 4,000 units was replaced by 300?
355 is what was awarded, and that is, by the way, not all, the vast majority were not in the disaster zone. Some of these were in Webb City, some of them were in Duquesne, which part of the southern part of Duquesne was hit with the tornado. I got that with our redistricting. I now have the whole zone except for 2 houses, I think.
What happened? Where are those people living? What happened to them? Where'd they go?
They left. A lot of them,
They left.
Neosho, when we had the tornado, housing within a 20, 25-mile area, a lot of small towns, it was filled.
Did many of them go across the state?
Well,
Across the state line.
state line, Glenn, you were looking for wherever you could find a place to live. And, people stayed at the jobs that were again, it hit part of our business. It didn't hit our downtown. It didn't hit our mall area. It did hit Rangeline, which was a pretty commercial area. But those people that were working restaurant jobs, after a while, you can't find a place to live. Well, gee, if there's a restaurant opening, if you're in Neosho and something opens in Neosho, you're going to just take the job in Neosho, so you don't do the 15-mile drive each way.
And you said that from 1990, when the tax credits were implemented, until about 2010,
2010 was when the required. Before that, it was not required.
on all low-income housing projects or just low-income housing projects?
Well, the low-income housing tax credits through the MHDC is what we researched.
But all projects or just the ones in disaster areas?
All.
All of them?
Yeah, no, the MHDC didn't require it for anybody.
What about, what about the historic tax credits? Are they required to do prevailing wage?
I have not looked at the historics.
And was this change in 2010 done because of some court proceeding, or it was just
It was
an opinion?
it was done by the commission, which is under the direction of our administration.
Sure. Do you know if it's been challenged in court
Well,
since then?
Not that I'm aware of in court. It's been our lieutenant governor, who sits on that committee, brought up and could not, because he's the only person in his party on that committee, got up, tried to get it waived just for disaster zones. Lieutenant governor has been very supportive. I believe there's someone here from his office today to testify. It was very supportive of this issue and for disaster zones. I mean, we're not talking about the entire huge gamut of our,
Although you could open it up to all, like it was before.
Right.
Yeah.
This bill I have tailored to meet a need that I think is very difficult. If you're going to say, oh, well, these people don't need housing.
Right. So they're making this decision, or they made this decision in 2010 on the guys that they're using they're considering tax credits like some kind of a public entity. Well, don't we do all kinds of TIFs and neighborhood improvement projects and all of that with private companies getting tax incentives, but not having to use prevailing wage?
We use tax
That's
incentives across the board.
Right.
Our economic.
So why would they single,
everything.
why would they single the low income housing sector out, which in my opinion might be the most important tax credit that we issue, other than the charitable ones?
Again, I think, I am not in the mind of the people
Yeah.
that decided to do this, but I think if you had not had something like the year of disasters, where there was a high demand need for the housing, not in disasters that really don't push the need for housing, it may not have been noticed for a couple more until you had something like
Sure.
Joplin tornado.
So because of the decision of this commission and the administration, it cost your area jobs, it cost lots of housing, cost people leaving the state because of the decision of some organization and not because of a law change or a lawsuit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Others? Representative Burns.
Permission to inquire.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Representative.
Good afternoon.
When you said that it was changed, the law wasn't changed, it was just the enforcement of the law?
No, the MHDC Commission, Missouri Housing Development Commission, decided, they implemented requiring prevailing wage. If I look, as an attorney, when you, and we have other attorneys in the room here, when you read the definition, prevailing wage, when you read the Supreme Court decision on the tax credits, this is not a public works project. That's why it had never been put on there, in my own opinion, before. This was done because someone's in charge of the committee, that has the control of the commission, decided they were going to do it. It was not a requirement of law that they do it. It does not, in my argument, it doesn't anywhere, there's nothing in law that says this is required in any way, shape, or form.
Well, you mentioned that you and Representative Weber are both attorneys. I'm not an attorney, but I've been through a lot of these issues, school board, those kind of things. And prevailing wage has been a law in the state for quite a number of years. Is that not true?
That's true.
Okay. And I think it could be argued, I've seen a lot of opinions and observing and reading about the things I have, even the United States Supreme Court, which their judges and lawyers will have different opinions depending on which side of the aisle they come from. So differences of opinion. But when you're talking about income tax credits, you're also talking about government money because it's tax money. It's a reduction in what would be paid in taxes, which actually is.
It is money that does not come in, you're correct, but it is not. The key thing with prevailing wage is government expenditure.
But, I mean, who collects the taxes but government? I mean, seriously, you can see yourself, and I know you must be a very good attorney, and I believe that Representative Weber is, and someone who can delve in and look at those things. I think it could be argued either way. When you're talking about tax money and saying it's not government money, but basically it is, indirectly or directly, it's government, because it's your taxes.
Unfortunately, with the law, well, fortunately and unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we have to deal in specifics. Prevailing wage was not intended for dealing with tax credits.
Well, I want to get to that. The point is, but I think there's ambiguity in a lot of law.
I wouldn't say that's ambiguity.
But it's never black and white. There's always a gray, and that's why lawyers get involved. And you just said yourself before, some lawyers could argue and different things and on different sides. And quite frankly,
that was on a.
But it's still the issue of lawyers. Lawyers, that's where they make their living. I see these laws come through, and after sitting on Board of Education, you see these things, you think, boy, that's going to give lawyers a lot of time in court. But that's just a point, okay? The issue is, from what I've never worked on a prevailing wage, because being, in the Teamsters, you're not on a prevailing wage.
You would make more, I would assume, than prevailing wage.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I mean, the point being is, in my understanding, it was always brought about quality workmanship. And in a disaster, it's been notorious. Well, just let me finish. In a disaster, it's been notorious throughout all the states that these fly-by-night people come in to take jobs, and who could stand to be hurt the least but low-income housing people? And you say housing in a disaster area, we had two major floods in St. Louis area in 93 and 95. Part of the area that I now represent has got low-income housing that's being built as we speak. Now they're requiring prevailing wage because it enables a person to maybe buy their first home, and they might be 60 years old. Their first home, the thing they can least afford is once they get in that home, they have to go back and make repairs. And that's what prevailing wage, and just the other part, and I'm not trying to be arguing with you at all. Please don't take it.
Oh, no, I'm not.
And I do respect you being through law school. I think that's a momentous accomplishment in your life. But just as you wouldn't recommend anybody go to a lawyer who hadn't been through law school, or a doctor who hadn't been through medical school, a neurosurgeon like the one that I went to last year and fixed me, how in the world could we ask someone to come in, a contractor, who doesn't have fully apprenticed trained workers, which covered under prevailing wage?
Okay.
And that's what I'm talking about, quality and workmanship.
Your journeyman, you're mixing a union and prevailing wage here. Those are not the same thing.
But that's who said it. It wasn't set by contractors. It was fought for by, and because in the union, I think a lot of times people, the first thing when I say union, people cringe, like, oh, those union thugs. That's not what it's about. It's about community, giving things back.
Well,
I mean, but the other point is, law school takes a long time, and so does college, so does an apprenticeship, 5 years. And when you're a journeyman, and it's also an insurance policy, because no matter what local it is, in the St. Louis building and construction trades, Kansas City construction trades, if they find that a journeyman messed something up, that union, organized labor force, will send back a journeyman to fix it free of charge. Now, being on a board of education where we went through these people being behind walls doing work that wasn't checked, 4 or 5 years later, you got to redo it. That's a problem for a school district or low-income housing or job in public schools.
You're talking, again, this is prevailing wage, and I think you're crossing into the union training programs as opposed to private training programs. Let me tell you that with this, I don't know if some of these people may or may not have been union. I don't think they were, but they may have been. But this is, I have documentation. I send out questions. When we upped prevailing, when they went to the federal new revised prevailing wage, our quality of construction went down. Value of windows, because it did. Not only the numbers go down, but the materials they put in. Are all Energy Star appliances used? What is the insulation value of these walls? When you increase labor 20%, and you have a fixed amount you're going to be able to deal with on low-income housing. It's not an open-ended market. You have X amount. If you can't make a certain amount of profit, I know some people want to put the evil company in, the private contractor here or the private company as the boogaboo bad guy in this thing. But if you personally aren't going to make a certain amount of profit on your wage, given your gas and stuff, you're not going to do the job. Same thing with a business person. To make what they consider the necessary level of profit, which is why Joplin still, by the way, it is not cost effective to build a lot of low-income housing. I mean, to build something you can rent for $300 a month, I mean, that is tough to do. And it's tough to get any sort of a profit over. That's why I think I support low-income housing tax credit, because I have seen firsthand the need, and the private market has a difficult time because the profit margin is so low and so tenuous. But these things, when I ask, how are you going to, the contractor that was going to do insulated concrete form, which I'm a big fan of. My second house, we built a house before I started running here. It's insulated concrete form. It can take an F5 hit. The roof may be gone. The walls aren't going anywhere. That changed. 2x6 construction with really good insulation became 2x4 construction with less good insulation. That's quality.
I understand that, but they're also what you call city and county inspectors. They're supposed to be inspecting those things. And please, don't get me wrong that I'm making out a business owner as a bad guy. I work for
our workers. Our workers aren't bad.
I work for one of the largest beer distributorships in the world. Okay? And Anheuser-Busch, one of the largest beer companies in the world. So I understand about profit. I understand that you have to make profit. And I understand when you do work, you have to make sure that company makes money, or why would they want you there? That thing. So that's not the point. But we're talking about quality.
Yeah.
I know in St. Louis County, building where I'm from, building these units, they have county inspectors that inspect the quality of the insulation. The windows have to be there. So when a job is bid with prevailing wage, here's what it is. Now, it's unfortunate, and there again, the point is,
prevailing wage is
my father was born in Joplin. My heart went out to Joplin in any community that happened to, okay? And that's not the point of this. But when you start chipping away at people's wages, which this will do, It's been talked about on the floor, lowering wages. That is bad for any community, in my opinion. And I'll leave it at that. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Are there other questions? I have 5 witnesses to testify in opposition to this bill. Gentlemen, with time constraints, so I'd like for you to hold it to 5 minutes each, please. Let's start with Mr. Jim Fall.
I do think I have a witness in favor also.
I'll get to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Mike Lewis. I'm president of the Missouri AFL-CIO, here today to testify against this bill. In all the talk about lawyerism and lawyerly behavior, I brought my lawyer to do the talking. So here you go.
Which is always dangerous. Thank you very much. I'm here testifying on behalf of the Missouri AFL-CIO as well as the building trades in opposition to the bill. Primarily for not only the reasons that were discussed regarding the wages, and I understand the bill sponsor's position regarding that this was originally not prevailing wage required work, and now is because of how the commission acted. Primarily on this bill, I would point out that this was a decision of the commission, and the commission changes from time to time. I think rather than the legislature spending time to impede its authority onto another body, that they should respect the wishes of that body, which, as we all know, will change from time to time, and the appropriate remedy if there is a problem, which I personally, in the organization I represent, don't think that there are, but that should be done through the body that has been granted the authority to handle such issues as it comes before it, rather than here at the legislature. If there are any specific questions, I'm happy to handle it.
Representative Kelly?
To inquire,
Yes.
just curious, who do you believe created the structure for tax credits?
The tax credits,
Yes.
I assume that was done through the legislature.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you understood that this was legislation that would affect tax credits, so the legislature was making a decision on those. So I appreciate your testimony, but I think this probably is an appropriate area for the legislature to clarify or classify how we're doing our tax credit programs. So thank you.
Others?
Briefly.
One
question. Do you know, are there any federal requirements that, or did MHTC make any, they made this move, was it to align with federal standards regarding prevailing wage in disaster areas? Do you have any knowledge of that?
My understanding, what I know about the use of prevailing wage in disaster areas primarily revolves around what happened in New Orleans after Katrina. While it wasn't specific to low-income housing, it was certainly affected. After Katrina, the Bush administration rescinded prevailing wage, again, generally, for the entire area, believing that it would be more cost-effective and they'd be able to build faster and cheaper. The Bush administration, after about, I believe it was 2 months, but I'm willing to be corrected on that, reinstituted Davis-Bacon, as the federal is called, because they had a great deal of problems with shoddy workmanship, money not being accounted for. I understand that this is a little different, as the representative, or as the bill sponsor put out, as this was something that has been brought to Missouri rather than something that was already in place. But there's been poor examples of that.
One thing we can look at, I don't know if you know the answer, if anybody else does, but oftentimes they combine federal and state low-income tax credits. And I was wondering if there's a requirement on the federal side.
That I don't know. I'm happy to get
Prevailing
an
wage.
That I don't know. I'm happy to get an answer. I do know,
Yeah,
however, that unlike the Missouri prevailing wage, there is a residential rate for the federal Davis-Bacon, which is used for housing issues. If it's specifically to low income or disaster, I'd be speaking without knowledge.
Thank you.
Representative Smith? Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm trying to understand it. We're trying to understand that bill in a sense of, I look at prevailing wage as protecting, giving the person or the people working on the project a fair shot to make a living for what they do. And it always seems like whether it's a corporation or whoever, when it comes down to cost savings, they start looking at the person that's going to be putting together these projects. And it was mentioned earlier that a contractor probably wouldn't take a job if the profit margin wasn't there or they cut corners. Would that apply to if you're bottoming out the wage? Do you think you're going to get the same high-skilled individual doing that high-skilled job on that project?
I think what the prevailing wage does is make sure that people that are in that trade, whether union or non-union, but people that are in the trade and have made a living at the trade, are not their employers are not competing on their wages, if that makes sense. There are plenty of ways to save money, and I applaud the bill sponsors' focus on low income, because I think that is important for working people, as well as for the green portions of it. I think there could be plenty of ways other than handling somebody's wages, an individual worker's wages, to address cost savings, one of which would be for more infrastructure or more investment in green technologies and building materials, or more use of kind of contractors and materials and those kind of things come in, more investment in low-income housing, rather than capping, or in this case, changing the prevailing wage to do things to lower the prices of these green materials.
Okay, so the chance of a contractor going over that prevailing wage is pretty slim. Do you think
in Missouri, in the two counties affected by Joplin, yes, I think it's the prevailing wage. I just checked it recently. They're fairly high. The asbestos worker, I think, is lost in those areas. The communication technology is lost in those areas. Some truck is lost in those areas. The prevailing wage set in the Joplin area is, I think, accurately reflects of what those wages are from the last change that we made.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Krieger.
Inquire, Mr. Chairman, briefly.
Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, sir.
Have you ever built a house?
No, sir, I rely on skilled laborers to do that.
Have you ever been the owner of a house that's being built?
I live in the city of St. Louis, so my house was built sometime in the 30s.
Okay. Do you know anyone that's had a home built through a contractor or whatever?
I know people who have built new homes, but I don't know anything about that.
Do you think that they use prevailing wage when they had their home built?
The folks that they wouldn't have used a prevailing wage because it'd be a private contract.
Exactly.
The people that I know would have been using high skill wages that are reflected of the area standard. I can share with that.
But not necessarily even union, though. They could have not been union work, or even how about having your house painted? You ever had your house painted where you live by someone?
Actually, yes, and it was a member of the district council.
I guess it would be if you were the council for AFL-CIO.
Yeah.
That probably wasn't a real good question. I think you know where I'm going.
I understand where you're going, and I agree with you. I'm probably not the person to answer those types of questions. However, I'll let you know that in my area, and as well as the people that I'm related to that live out in St. Charles, O'Fallon,
or rural Missouri,
Lincoln County, which is less and less rural than it used to be. I know that the folks that I associate with, which are voters in those areas, believe in keeping the wages high, and when their tax money or through tax credit, when public money is being expended or not collected as a result, they take very seriously that they want the men and women doing that work to be earning a wage, and that there's any kind of high wage that is reflected of the area in which they live, and that they want as much as possible to make sure that it's local people working on that. It's not always, prevailing wage is by no means a guarantee that it's going to be local people, but constitutionally, it's the best protection that we have to make sure that local people have the same shot.
I think you said exactly what I wanted to say. Local people, the people in your community or my community. We want to be able to hire those people and use those people to build our homes, to paint our homes. Where I'm from, we don't use union people to build our homes. We don't. I'm a home builder, and nobody does in my community. No one. And I'm not making that up. And I think that would be reflective of many communities across our state, especially in rural Missouri or even in Southwest Missouri. So I think that's what this bill is trying to address. It specifically the Joplin situation. Majority of the homes built in Joplin don't use union wages and don't pay prevailing wage. They pay whatever the local painter, the local builder. Around where I'm at, we use a lot of Amish labor, and they're very good craftsmen, by the way.
I would imagine they would be.
Now, I wouldn't put them building a bridge in St. Louis, or I wouldn't put them on a highly trained technical job that many union skilled laborers can do that we appreciate. But this is why I think this is what this bill is trying to do, is directly reflect the community that it's in.
And if I may respond, I'm happy to get into that discussion on some of the other bills, because I can explain how it's reflected and how the prevailing wage. But for this specific bill, which respectfully the sponsor has limited to Missouri housing and to disaster areas, I think it's best left to the body that decision is best left to the body in which the legislature has entrusted that decision. And that is with the housing authority at this point.
Well, I think Representative Kelly had a very valid point, though. This is the body, we're the body that actually developed and implemented the tax credit. So I do think it is appropriate. Thank you for the inquiry.
And to be clear, I'm not saying it's inappropriate. I think it's better left there, not that it's inappropriate for the legislature to act in the way the legislature.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Good. I now here for someone speaking in support of the bill. All right. How about Denise Hasty in opposition?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Denise Hasty, and I'm the Vice President of Advocacy and a registered lobbyist for the new Associated General Contractors of Missouri. The new AGC of Missouri was formed in mid-December upon the merger of the former AGC of Missouri and the AGC of St. Louis. Our new organization has 550 corporate members who are commercial, industrial, heavy, and highway contractors, industry partners, and related firms. Membership in the new AGC spans 110 counties in the state, and we have offices in both St. Louis and Jefferson City. The AGC is opposed to the changes to prevailing wage statutes as outlined in House Bill 285. In 2013, the legislature passed a significant prevailing wage reform bill that became law. And that language and calculation methods outlined in this new law were fully vetted through numerous stakeholders and many hours of painstaking work. And the intent of those reforms were to significantly lessen the impact of union wages in predominantly open shop areas of the state by instituting a new calculation method in 93 of Missouri's counties. The AGC believes that it's too soon to fully be able to ascertain and measure the impact of those 2013 changes, and that making changes again is just too soon at this time. We also believe that while we are sympathetic to the needs of people in the disaster areas to rebuild quickly and efficiently and cost effectively, this is also a time of high unemployment in the construction industry, and prohibiting prevailing wage in this manner will only increase incidences of out-of-state workers taking jobs from Missourians. And to reduce the wages in those areas would also potentially do a double hit to the pocketbooks of the people who live in that area by reducing their wages. So generally speaking, we just believe that it's probably too soon to really be able to have a good measure of how effective the changes from 2013 were on the prevailing wage law.
Thank you. Representative Kelly, you had a question?
To inquire.
Oh, yeah.
Based on your testimony, the changes that we passed, you believe will make prevailing wage more reflective to the actual wages that are being paid for a trade in a certain area of the state, is that correct?
I believe that was the intent of what was done in 2013.
Well, I would agree with you. I was here and fully supported that measure, and I would assume that if that's the wages that are being paid in those areas and it's going to be more accurately reflected already, that this will just solidify what's already going to be happening, and that is the wages in those areas are going to be the wages that are being paid for those average contractors and the people in that area. So I appreciate you confirming that this is a great idea to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Mr. Tim Green, would you like to testify, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tim Green, and I'm here to speak in opposition of the bill for the National Electrical Contractors Association. It's an organization of over 220 electrical contractors on the eastern side of Missouri. I think the issue has been discussed, not a deference to the chairman. If there's no questions, I'd just like to once again urge the opposition to this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Mr. Raymond Hefner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the committee. My name is Raymond Hefner. I'm here representing the Plumbing Industry Council and the Missouri Association of Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors and SMAC to St. Louis. I think the issue has been discussed. What I would like to do is leave an executive summary of a 178-page report that was done by the University of Missouri, Kansas City on the benefits of prevailing wage. I won't go into it, but I will leave it with my testimony so the members of the committee have it available for their referral. I would entertain any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Adam McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Adam McBride. Here today representing roughly 14,000 construction craft laborers in the state of Missouri. I'll keep it short for this one. I would just like to go on record in opposition.
Thank you, sir. Are there others here who wish to testify against the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Nancy Giddens. Have not much more to add other than on behalf of the Construction Employers Coalition and the Carpenters District Council, we would like to go on record in opposition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honorable Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Bruce Holt. I'm a registered lobbyist with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, covering St. Louis and Kansas City, and we just want to go on record in opposition to the bills we have in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Are there others in opposition? Is there anyone here who wishes to testify for information purposes? None appearing. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 285. We will now hear House Bill 195, Representative Love. Go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and committee. Record number 1 Love, District 125 representative. And I am here. My purpose is for 2 things. And before we get into the debate, it is number 1, spend taxpayer money wiser. And number 2 is to create opportunity for work throughout Missouri, not just in a circle of 60 miles around St. Louis and about 30 miles around Kansas City. And I'm going to be right up front with you, let you know, yes, I am here to chip away at wages, but to provide a reasonable rate of wages and a reasonable, fair wage at competitive bids. So I filed House Bill 195. It has to do with prevailing wage.
You'll see in the summary, it revises the definition of construction as it relates to providing wages on public work projects. We're going to be talking about public work projects, not private work projects. In the areas that I live, I know of never, ever in my lifetime in St. Clair County, Hickory County, Cedar County, or Benton County has a house or a private building been built by union labor. We don't do that in the rural areas. Zilch, never been done. Now, it would also, in 3, revise the definition of maintenance work, and in number 4, it specifies that the hourly rate of wages for all counties except, we're going to leave 9 counties in the city of St. Louis alone. Okay, it's not going to affect you all. So hopefully this is a compromise right out of the gate. And what we'll use, you have a chart, and I filed this last year also. We'll use the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics by metropolitan and non-metropolitan. We need to repeat that. Metropolitan and non-metropolitan area occupational employment wage estimates. And you'll have that sheet that you should have been passed out. And number 5, it says that after it specifies the counties and the city of St. Louis that's carved out, it says the prevailing hourly wages will continue to be determined by consideration of the applicable wage rates established by collective bargaining agreements. So here I am. I would like to answer any questions. But before I do, I want you to know some statistics, and I handed this sheet out too. State and local prevailing wage laws. Today, 31 states in the District of Columbia enforce prevailing wage laws. Now, this is government enforcement. This is government involvement, okay? To me, it goes against the ideal of a free market and free labor and the right and freedom of work. Okay, most of these prevailing wage laws were enacted during the New Deal. I'm talking about Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal in the 1930s. But here's the real, where the rubber meets the road. You all heard the term Davis-Bacon Act. Well, I sent you a sheet out so you know that. Many of us don't know what the Davis-Bacon Act was or why it came about. About 3 paragraphs down, it says this act was passed with the specific intent of preventing non-unionized black and immigrant laborers, in other words, the workers out of the South, from competing with unionized white workers for scarce jobs in the North during the Depression. That's how come we have this. That's the beginning of it. The states that do not have prevailing wage, and yes, there are some of them, 9 states have never had a law. You're listening? And then also in 9 others, they have been repealed. The idea is to lower the labor costs so we can get more concrete for our money, and also more water lines, more sewer lines, and it will be done by trained and skilled workers. I hear this over and over again about this debate that in rural areas that we don't have trained and skilled workers. I want to testify this for myself. I went to college for 3 months. I didn't do English very good, and I just basically packed up my bags and left. I decided that wasn't for me. So I went to a carpenter school. And I hired on with a professional carpenter and worked 4+ years. Went on my own, and I ran a construction crew for several years. All the young boys that I hired was hardworking farm boys. They wasn't afraid to work, and every one of them had been through building trades in high schools. Yes, we do have training programs in rural areas with our technical college or our technical schools and building trades. The idea that we don't have trained skilled workers, I don't believe is right. In fact, in places in our areas, we have rock layers and stone masons. They lay rock and stone, their daddy did, their granddaddy did. They've got reputations, and I know in some cases where people will wait 6 months to a year just to get someone with that skill and that reputation to build their fireplaces and do their brickwork. We also, the idea of having shoddy work, first of all, these public work projects have a architect, engineer, design plan. Okay, it is up to the boards that is elected by the citizens of the towns, the schools, and the councils to see that they hire reputable people. They have blueprints, they have specifications, they have building inspectors, and they have local codes. So it's not like it's run for rampant, anything goes out here in the rural area. Now, I will say this, a lot of our areas do not have zoning. And if you want to go out and buy 40 acres of timber, set up a deer camp, and build you a shack, listen, you can do that. Thank God we can still do that in Missouri and America. But when you're building, most of the time inside the city limits of a reasonable community, you're going to see that we're going to have building codes. We currently, right now, are building a Dollar General store in a little town of Flower City on 13 Highway, 400 people in population. Dollar General has a crew that comes around and builds in buildings. I was in the Landmark Cafe yesterday, eating chicken dinner after church. Very popular place, by the way, if you're ever down in Flower City. I seen a table of 4 workers sitting, all bundled up in heavy coats. I had eye contact with them. I knew immediately. I could tell when I looked at a working man in the eye because I'm one of them. I went to the restroom, stopped and pulled up a chair and talked to them for about 15 minutes. 20-degree day, 20-mile-an-hour wind. And when I left, they were already back up on top of that building putting down roofing. This was on Sunday. They were working. They had bid that job. I'll guarantee you, they wasn't getting double pay. They wasn't getting time and a half. They were working because they were working men. All I'm asking you to do is to consider the freedom to work and let people work. Dollar General builds these little stores all over the country. These same workers told me they build all of O'Reilly Automotive buildings and they build all of FedEx buildings. They are working men and they knew what they were doing. With that, I'll take any questions.
Whoever, shocking, I'm sure, Mr. Chair. I'm thoroughly confused now. How does Dollar General fit into this situation?
They don't. I'm just giving you an idea, an example of a working project where people work. These same people could be building our sidewalks, our sewer lines, and our water lines, our school buildings, our fire department buildings,
Right.
ambulance buildings, whatever we're building. When we're spending taxpayer money, all I'm asking is, as a legislature body, let's make it where we spend our taxpayer money wisely, okay? Now, are we going to lower the wages for some people? And if you're comparing your wages to St. Louis or Kansas City, you bet we're going to.
But we're not. We're not.
Oh, yes, we are going to lower. You bet we're going to lower.
No. You're saying a false argument. I agree that you're lower. I'm saying we're not comparing them to St. Louis and Kansas City. Nobody here is comparing them to St. Louis and Kansas City. We are using local wage rates.
No, you're not. No, I'm telling you, I don't know where those figures come from. I've got them right here. I'll give you a piece of paper. They are not local wage rates. I can load up a 10-passenger van of workers for $15 an hour in any county in my district, okay? If we put a base floor at $24 an hour, that is a real pay raise. And that is a reasonable, fair wage in rural Missouri. And I'm talking about
when the Republican majority passed the 2013 prevailing wage law, they said that part of it, that he said that it would move rates to match the local wage rate.
I told you here last year that don't amount to a pinch of squat. It hasn't amounted to one yet, and it's not going.
That's fine. I'm just saying, your party passed that, and they said this is about saying the prevailing wage reflects local wage rates, and now you're telling me that it doesn't reflect local wage rates. So I'm thoroughly confused if you think that your party passed that bill and that bill didn't do anything. Is that what you're saying right now?
I'm saying that, yes, sir.
Okay. So you and I have found common ground and agreement.
Listen, if it did, I wouldn't have filed this bill.
You voted for it though, didn't you?
I don't know if I did or not. That thing got some watered down on the Senate side. I don't know what happened. I still don't. I can read it right now and don't know what it means.
I'll have to look. I'm willing to bet that you did though. My other question is, you gave a very passionate and complimentary talk about these guys working in 20-degree weather on a roof with the wind, and I absolutely am with you. And then you said you want to chip away at their wages.
I'm not chipping away them boys' wages. Them boys are doing a job by the job. They're making, you know what? They're probably making $60, $70 an hour if they're working yesterday. But they were hustling. We do not and should not place a rate whenever somebody will competitively bid a job. I've been there and done that. When I can build a house with 3 men beside me and an old pickup truck and build a house in 5 days and hang all the doors and windows and put the roof on it, and some union guys across the street in Blue Springs, Missouri, takes 2 weeks to build one, buddy, we were not working by the hour, we were working by the foot, and we made more money than they did.
I'm having a hard time here asking you questions because it's just not making sense. You said that nobody in your district uses union labor.
None. Not for building private homes or bonds. Now, yes, they do. I don't call them union, but whenever they do the sewer projects and the water lines and all this,
These same local guys that you're talking about, and I agree, I empathize with you. I know that but these rural areas need money. People need to earn a fair wage. They need income.
right there.
And the same guys that you were just talking about, those are the guys whose wages are going to be chipped away at in your
Well, they're
words.
not. They don't even have work right now. They're living off deer meat and fishing and cutting wood. I want you to get this right here and look what I'm talking about. This page right here has got an ambulance building in Colorado Springs. It got hit by a hailstorm in September. Okay? Now, they had to rebid the roof. And if you look down middle ways on the first page, they got bids. The insurance company said they had to get bids. Okay? Guaranteed Roofing out of Joplin, Missouri bid $26,468 in a fairly simple bid with few details. Another contractor, Absolute Contractor, submitted the most complete and the highest price. They followed the insurance company's document on needed repairs in minute detail, giving a price on all aspects of the damage. 2 men from the company were present to answer questions and assured the board that their bid followed the Missouri law on prevailing wage to the letter. The men said that their prevailing wage inflates the cost 400%. The total bid was $63,205. Another firm out of Nevada, Missouri, Gilded LLC, bid $32,009. There was language, anyhow, the board ended up taking, with the insurance company had estimated the project at $22,000, they ended up taking, due to the prevailing wage law, the $63,205. I'm just saying,
They have a terrible lawyer. The lawyer is terrible. If they took $22,000 on their insurance policy and for a project that cost $60,000, which first off makes no sense. And you're a man with common sense. You can look at those numbers and just say, that doesn't make any sense. So use your common sense and you know that doesn't make any sense. And then their lawyer is awful, if that is your example. You said yourself you don't understand the prevailing wage law we passed in 2013. So why would you come back to this General Assembly and say, I'm going to try to change the law that I admit I don't understand? That's just bad. It doesn't make any sense.
Let's talk about the 2013 law. Okay, it strikes me that if you don't have prevailing wage in one county, you go to the next county, and if you don't have it there, you go to the next county. Listen, we don't have any counties reporting prevailing wages. We got mostly Amish workers and local contractors and stuff. They're not working by the hour. They're independent contractors. They either work by the job, so we don't have a prevailing wage, okay? So we get waxed over by some other prevailing wage far away, okay? Now, let's look at a sidewalk project.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time. This just isn't going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Smith. Go ahead.
How you doing, Representative Lewis?
Very good.
All right.
Been looking forward to this all week. It snowed out last
You
week.
seem pumped up.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand it, because I look at everything from the guy on the roof, like you were talking about. I'm the guy. I don't work on the roof anymore. I'm in the building, but I'm the worker bee.
I've been in
Legislature.
still am.
I was at work Friday and I was supposed to go today, but I'm not gonna make it. I look at it, I don't understand how, I will never agree that it's okay for a contractor or a company to make whatever profit they want to make, but it comes at the expense of the person that's actually doing the job. So what I'm saying is, you've got houses or you got a lot going on in this bill. You're defining maintenance work different, which can actually mean construction. It's a whole lot, but I'm just going to get to the part of how do you help a community by paying a worker a unfair wage, the way I see it, or a lower wage than what the market is dictating. How does that help the community? How does that help Bob that lives 2 streets over? When just say something like this is implemented and then something that happened in New Orleans happens, the population of, there were 50, and I got nothing against anybody, but my father was working down there in construction management after Katrina. And when they did, the federal government did their thing with prevailing wage, it changed the game in New Orleans. It bottomed out rates all across the board when it came to construction. So the person 2 streets over didn't have a chance, because you had people coming in from all other states, some undocumented workers coming in, and they would work for just food for the day for the most part, and sleep in sleeping bags, but they had an opportunity. And I see this as kind of a gateway once you knock that prevailing wage out. So my question is, how does it help the community in that sense of that person right down the street just trying to make an honest wage?
I can answer that. Have you got this sheet?
I've got a few sheets.
Okay, this here is a scale of the 4 counties in my district, their prevailing wages for 10 different building trades. And over on the right, you'll see the Federal Bureau of Statistics. And Representative, I'm not trying to jerk the rug out completely under labor. Okay, I'm not here doing it completely. No, I'm sure not. Listen, when you see that Federal Bureau of Statistics on the right-hand column, and you look down through that, that is close to $10 per hour above any skilled carpenter, mason, plumber in my area that is currently making. That is a pay raise. Now, here's what that would do. Let's say you're going to build, for instance, my community is trying to build a senior center for seniors to come together and have dinners on Monday through Friday and Meals for Wheels. They got a grant, about $600,000. They designed a building, drew it up to the plans, had an engineer do it and everything, put it out for bids. Guess what? The bids came in, all 3 of them, over $1 million. 1.1, 1.2. They didn't have the money. So their only option was to go back, reduce the square footage of the building, change it from a metal frame building to a wood frame building. They finally got the bids the other day, the second time around, and they got a bid for around $600,000. Now, this is still paying prevailing wage. I'm going to tell you something. If our local carpenters in our hometown that grew up there, have been there all of their life, and are going to be there the rest of their life, if they could build that building, they can build that building for $450,000.
But wasn't this local people who be working on the project?
No, this is the process. We have people. Listen, our local people, if they want to work and make union wages, you know where they go? They either move to Kansas City or they go to St. Louis. Most of them, we even have people drive 100 miles a day back and forth to Kansas City to work union rates. That's fine if they want to do it. I never chose to do that. I worked 88 days one time for General Motors, and I says, take it granted. I went back home and hauled hay for 2 cents a bale. And I worked on my own, and I learned to do everything by the rate, by the foot, okay? Now, we do have good craftsmen, as I mentioned earlier, but we do not have union workers there. So as a result, whenever these jobs come in and they bid them, Westport Construction out of Clinton is going to get that. They build all the senior centers. They do all of these little fancy prevailing wage jobs. They specialize in them. They're selfish. They want to keep all that for themselves because nobody else in that area in Southwest Missouri has a chance to do those jobs.
Now, is it because, now, so that company you just mentioned, are they a union company or non-union?
No, they're non-union, but they pay prevailing wage. They sort of specify. They cater to those little types of jobs.
So another contractor has an opportunity. It just seems like, and I'm sure the other worker is saying, I really wish I worked for that company that's getting that job because then I can make what I'm supposed to make.
Okay, let's go back to our point. A senior center building, they got a grant, okay? Where did the money come from for that grant?
I don't know.
Well, it's taxpayer money somewhere in the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to pay prevailing wage. That's the concern. Is everybody that spends taxpayer money, whether you're putting a roof on an ambulance building, whether you're building a senior center building, whether you're building a school, a bus barn, or even re-roofing a baseball stadium in a public park. If you've got taxpayer money, if it's over $2,000, according to Davis Bacon, maybe we need to go back into the 1930s and readjust that figure for inflation and bring it up to update times. But anyhow, the fact is, we waste taxpayer money in these rural areas paying too high labor. We can still pay less labor and have a good paying, fair paying job. That's all I'm asking.
I don't think any of my,
I'm not asking you or your workers in St. Louis to come to rural Missouri.
they're not, because these
But
are.
you're gonna have to learn how to kill deer and catch catfish and live off the land and sell a few cows and do a little work along the way to make it. But we got people that like to live like that, okay?
Which is.
Let us live in our area and we'll let you live in your area. I carved the counties out. I'm gonna leave yours alone. I'm not messing with your
Which
ways.
is fine. I just would like to see, and maybe in this room, there's some people from your county that are gonna testify and say, hey,
Well,
this
we
is
may
too
have
much money
some, I don't know.
for me to make. A fair rate is too much for me to make. And until I see or hear a whole bunch of kind of workers saying that, no, I'm not gonna accept this, this is too much for what I do for a living. I can't, I see it from the eyes of, here, I can make more profit, because there's no limit on profit that a contractor or anybody can make off any of these projects. But we want to, in a sense, limit how much the work.
Then contractors are bidding competitive bid. Right now, let's take a contract.
It's a competitive rate.
Let's bid on that senior center, okay? We draw the specs in. No contractor has got any given on buying material. Basically, iron is iron, concrete is concrete, okay? So you're locked into bidding the material, okay? So where's your example to be able, where's your option to be able to be competitive? When you look at labor, right here, the state of Missouri says you gotta pay $35 an hour for this and for this and this. So the only way you can competitively bid is to do a little bit faster than the other guy, okay? I'm just saying, let the contractors bid the jobs. They may bid, they don't have to bid this least amount. They can bid more if they want to, but listen, if they get smart and want the job, they'll bid less. They won't be able to give the taxpayers more concrete, more water lines, more building square footage for their money than they're currently getting. That's what this is about.
I do hear you. I do not agree. I think this bill, along with others that we've heard, will open the door on the board of this state. And we will see a population change in this state, and you will have the guy that's making the $15 an hour at home saying, more, Representative Love, what's going on?
You are exactly right.
There's
You're going to see a change in this state. You'll see people start moving in here like they have going to Texas.
What about the person 3 doors down? That's what I'm saying. Because just like you mentioned Family Dollar, and I'll wrap this up in a second.
If you don't like living in the rural area, you can move to Kansas City or St. Louis. A lot of us like living in the rural area. We know how to get by.
As a traveling crew, and most of them do not live in Missouri with that crew that they have. And most of them aren't making a whole lot of money with the crew that they have, and that's the danger that it can be Pandora's box, and we open it up, and then there's something in it that we know not.
That's like Davis Bacon done it.
No, we need that. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any Burns?
Rich inquire. You and I met on a freshman tour.
That's right. Yes, sir.
We became friends.
That's right.
So we're friends to this day.
You bet.
Even though we agreed to disagree.
Oh, listen, we'll arm wrestle and still be friends.
That's right. And then I'm still waiting for that ham and bean and cornbread that your wife's gonna make and come down and enjoy at your house, okay? But some things you touched on, and I can't quite grasp. You say in $15 an hour, but yet they're making $60,000 a year. Jump from $15 an hour, that's about $30,000 a year. And also you mentioned the other day when you and I talked that it's private contractor, $15 an hour. That doesn't include any benefits, taxes coming out, hospitalization, or anything like that. It's just a flat $15 an hour that you may pay someone to work for your company. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you get from, you just said some of those guys are making $60,000 a year. If they're making $15 an hour as a contractor, independent contractor, and how does that jump to $60 an hour? And I think some of the things that are reflected on these sheets also include benefits. In other words, hospitalization, retirement, vacation, that a contractor may be paying those folks, that it all encompasses that 30 or 50, not in St. Louis, I know it's about $50 or $60 an hour, but that's the whole pay package, not their take-home pay, but the whole pay package. So back to that question, how do you get from $15 an hour and make it $60,000 a year?
Okay, I don't remember, I can't connect the dots between $15 and $60,000 a year. Okay.
600 a week times
No, that
52
don't.
weeks, and that's,
Yeah, that don't
30,000.
work, but anyhow, first of all, most of us work more hours, okay? But that's up to the individual, okay? I guess what you need to look at is the rate of the cost of living in rural areas is probably half as much as it is in the urban areas. That's just a fact, okay? So we have to make a choice of a lifestyle, okay? There are many, many things that you do not have cost. You're not paying city taxes. You're not buying water. You're not paying sewer. You're not paying for trash pickup. And believe it or not, you might choose to be like me, and I don't even have caller ID or satellite TV. So you learn to live on less, okay? Now, when you make a reasonable wage, you've still got enough money to live, send your children to school, and have them. I've been fortunate enough to have all four of my children graduate from college. They've done a lot better than I have. But I never, ever wanted to go live in the city. So I learned to live on less and work for less. And we've got people all over rural Missouri. These counties that I'm talking about are willing to get by like that. And that rate that I've got on there is actually an increase from what they're used to making.
Right, and I'm understanding what you're saying, but however, there was a song back from First World War, how you can keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris. The point is, with all the innovations today, all the modernization of the world, someone making $15 an hour cannot enjoy all of that. Now, the other issue,
live in the country.
Now, well, here's the other issue. I'm glad you brought that up, because you said your children went through public school, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just looking at a chart. I've done a lot of research on this, because I sat on the Board of Education for 12 years. And El Dorado Springs School District, R2 School District, the state portion of their dollars are, local is 42.24%, state 45.63%, federal 12.13%, okay? In the district that I live in, now that's out of the foundation formula. That's almost 50% of their budget comes from the state foundation formula.
Yes, sir.
Okay? We in the city are subsidizing your schools because in the district I live in, 86%, 86.36% come from local property taxes, money that I make. 10.52% come from the state, which means you're getting an exorbitant amount in your home, one of your home school districts, that's being paid for by me, by the prevailing wage and by what we set in the state. And all we're saying is we want your schools to pay their fair share, be able to make the living to pay their fair share, so we don't have to pick up your cost all the time. And as it turns out, rural areas are notorious for that, out of the foundation formula, which we all know is very severely underfunded. But the point being is, you're not living there on the land free of charge. We're subsidizing you with our prevailing wage, with our union wages, with our good jobs, Kansas City and us. The point being is, that's not a level playing field. So when I drive through on a freshman tour, and I've seen some of these areas and how depressed they are economically, my heart goes out. And even though I'm a union person, I want them to make more money, union-wise, non-union-wise, so they can enjoy the standard of living that we have in St. Louis and Kansas City and other areas. And that in lies the problem. When you say $15 per hour is plenty for anybody to live on, you told me that just you came from church and you saw those gentlemen in the restaurant that are working on a Sunday when it's cold. First of all, up on a roof or wherever they work, it's probably against OSHA standards. OSHA, okay? In my district,
They didn't have on any hard hats.
Well, but again, that's against federal law. The other issue is that's not safe. That's not a good working condition. What about their families? And going door to door, you should probably go in your district, I go in mine. When it gets dark, we stop going door to door. I'm walking through a very nice neighborhood, south right off of Union Road in Lee May, and I hear, And I look up, and here's a gentleman with a contractor company speaking in what appeared to be Spanish or Mexican, talking about 6 workers up on that roof. They're still tapping when it's dark. Now, that's, you just mentioned your children are doing better than you, my children are doing better than me. I don't want that job for my children or anybody's children in this country where they're working unsafe after dark, putting up a roof. That's what these standards are set for the standard of living. That's why in America, we have a standard of living. So we can agree to disagree and you can present all those figures, but I want to see the standard of living in your area and all the areas in the state rise up instead of pulling other areas down. And that's my point. Mr. Chairman, and you want to respond, but that's the last of my question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's start with Mr. Jim Fall. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you for your time again. My name is Jim Paul. I'm testifying in opposition to this bill on behalf of Missouri AFL-CIO as well as the building trades. A little more intimidating when the sponsor sits next to me rather than over there before, but good to see you again. The 2 things in this bill that I wanted to point out is 1, the definition change. Actually 3 things. 1, the definition change. 2, the change to how counties outside of the St. Louis City and Kansas City areas are handled, as well as then the federal rate, which I understand is on in front of you. As far as the federal rate is concerned, and the sponsor alluded to this, that in many areas it is going to raise the rate for some folks here when you take into consideration the changes that were made in 2013. Also, it's not a true reflection rate of the trades in those areas, as in the rate that is developed and reflected in the federal rate in the bill takes into consideration wages of everybody for a number of different disciplines, not just construction, but also secretarial, administrative, and that. So the idea is to set a reflective wage is likely not the best way to do it. The second point I wanted to make was regarding the change in the definition. The definition changes that are reflected here started popping up in legislation a couple of years ago as a result of a foreign company which sued a foreign-owned company which sued the state of Missouri because they had bid a project telling the local body that it was not prevailing wage. Before the start and before the bid was actually accepted, the company was told, no, this is a prevailing wage job and prevailing wage is required. And at that point, the company sued the state of Missouri, which was trying to enforce its own rate. So that language is reflected out of an effort of that after they sued the state of Missouri and then lost. Then finally, I just want to talk briefly about the changes that were made in 2013. I went through county by county over the new changes. And I think as the representative from the AGC alluded to, in many of these counties, you are seeing different wage rates as a result of that. Not in every county, but what it is incumbent upon reporting, as we've said time and time again. Reporting is what sets the wages. In rural counties, primarily your counties that are in your 3rd and 4th tier, rather than the 1st and 2nd tier in the state of Missouri, they're not determined the same anymore as they are in the St. Louis area. What they do is the collective bargaining rates and the non-collective bargaining rates are separated. And before even looking at what the price is, you look in those 3rd and 4th class counties, you look at how many hours under a collective bargaining agreement were worked and how many under a not under a collective bargaining agreement were worked. And if there's more non-collective bargaining rate hours, you don't even look at the CBA hours. Those are completely cast aside. And then you look at just in those non-CBA hours, what is the most frequently occurring rates? As that happened, there's a number of trade unions that no longer set the rate. There are 40 counties that the Asbestos Workers Union no longer sets in the state of Missouri. There are 20 counties that the Glazers no longer set in the state of Missouri. There are 48 counties that the communication technicians no longer set in the state of Missouri. And a number of these hours, the carpenters, there's 5 that the carpenter counties that the carpenters no longer set the rate. And in a lot of these counties as well, the rate was set by just a few hours. Cedar County, for instance, in Bates County, did not change, but no hours, they did not change, they did not lower, but there weren't a lot of hours submitted because of that. I know in at least a few counties, as little as 2 and 3 hours prevail. In some counties, as many as 12 hours were all that was submitted. And just as a quick reflection, in Howell County, for instance, a cement mason rate today is $13 an hour. I can present to you, as you can probably imagine, that is not the CDA rate. That is not a union rate. The prevailing wage for an iron worker in Howell County is $13.50. The painter rate is $9 an hour. And that's with 21 cents in fringe benefits. The number one asbestos workers, overwhelmingly their fringe benefit packages now in the Howells that are in the counties that are not set by prevailing wage or by the CBA rate rather is $1.42 to $1.44 an hour, which, as you can imagine, probably does not cover the health insurance that someone who deals with asbestos, even if it's not their primary work, even if it's incidental. $1.44 does not buy a whole lot of health insurance for an asbestos worker. So to that end, I would say we've been here for 2 years now. We're doing the second round now of the new law. After 1 year, already some things have been reflected and changed. And I think you'll see that more accurate kind of prevailing area standard wages rather are going to be what's reflected here. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bruce Hillis.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bruce Hillis. I'm from Mexico, Missouri. I'm a free market advocate and an advocate for economic freedom. I testify in support of this bill. However, this bill does not go far enough. This prevailing wage law should be repealed in their entirety. Why is prevailing wage repeal necessary? Because they increase costs to the state and its tax-paying citizens, burdensome regulations, and by limiting competition. This isn't complicated. It's that old demand and supply stuff. It's a basic axiom of economics that if you reduce the supply, you increase the cost. You won't hear supporters of prevailing wage law talk much about the national heritage of this bill, which was mentioned earlier, or the unjust transfer of wealth. And that's what prevailing wage laws do. They transfer wealth. They do not create wealth. There is no moonbeam of money from which you draw on to pay prevailing wage. When you fix the price of labor, and that price fixing by government is higher than the wage rate would otherwise be under competitive conditions, you don't create any productivity. The only way you increase wealth is you increase productivity. Increasing wages without an increase in productivity is merely transferring wealth. And that's what prevailing wage laws do. They transfer wealth. The proponents of prevailing wage will present some economic studies. I heard one mentioned a while ago, and I believe that study is the adverse economic effect from repeal of prevailing wage law in West Virginia. You'll hear them claim certain things in these studies, but those studies are based on models by economic planning models that completely disregard the alternative use of those funds. For instance, there isn't, as I said, a moonbeam of money. Money for projects is not free. It has to be taken from the taxpayer citizens to fund projects. And so if through price fixing of labor, you're paying more for that project than would otherwise be produced in an open and free market, you're overpaying for that. And when you overpay for those goods, you're having to take too much money from the citizen. And the money that you have to take from the citizens to do that would otherwise be used to produce other purchases, make other expansions of the size of the development or provide other services. So the models that they use, the REMI model, the REMS 2 model, are complete fallacies because they do not take into consideration the alternative use of the funds that would otherwise be spent on prevailing wage. Proponents of prevailing wage will, and as you've just briefly heard, often talk about, well, the only thing we need to do is tweak the paperwork. Paperwork, unnecessary paperwork, is no different than an unneeded carpenter picking up an unneeded hammer. Creating this cost to produce this paperwork is government forced feather-bedding and drives up the cost to Missouri and its citizens for this burdensome cost of calculating the prevailing wage laws, whether by the proponents that are in the industry doing it or whether government does it itself. You have to take money from the citizens to pay for those costs. Proponents of prevailing wage will also maintain that it produces fair and competitive bidding under prevailing wage. This is a twist on a preposterous claim often used by proponents of prevailing wage, which maintains that the construction industry is uniquely subject to harmful competition that slashes wages and reduces standards. That when wages are set by law, that harmful competition is avoided. That's a claim of emotional argument, not of objective analysis. Think about it. Logic alone will tell you that if the wage portion of the contract is set and fixed and priced, contractors and others will look to other ways to reduce their cost, whether by reducing the scope of the project, as Representative Love has explained, reducing the size of the project, or rewriting the specifications to require less quality or less standards. They'll also maintain that prevailing wage laws promote unskilled workers. That in the absence of prevailing wage laws, there isn't any way to produce these skilled workers like through the unions. The inference put forward is that the industry depends on these unions for adequate supply of trained workers. There is no evidence to suggest that there is more of a market failure among construction workers than there is in any other occupation group. There are community colleges, private technical institutes, and other training sources. In addition, in the private market, helpers, where they are learning their skills, is more prevalent than it is under prevailing wage, where contractors under prevailing wage are hesitant to pay that bigger wage to an unskilled worker and so they won't bring on as many helpers into their industry. These and other claims supported by proponents of prevailing wage are a complete disguise of their real purpose: to limit competition by the force of law. This purpose applies both to the sellers of labor and to sellers of construction contracts. The sellers of labor want to limit competition from others who might underbid their price, and obviously sellers of construction contracts in that prevailing wage environment want to limit their competition from bidders to people that are forced to pay prevailing wage. Why is this purpose disguised? As anyone with even the most basic knowledge of economics understands, that when competition is limited, prices rise. It's basic supply and demand stuff. Added cost to increased wages that result from prevailing wage requirements is at the expense of Missouri taxpayers and results in less government buildings and infrastructure or other goods and services. There's no other way about it. The free market should determine what the price of wage should be. I challenge each of you to send a memo out to your particular constituents and say, hey, I want to decrease your wages so that I can pay more wages to construction contractors. And that's what you do under prevailing wage. No, you don't go out and reduce their wage. You reduce their income through taxes to pay for these projects. While there's many studies by scholars with no dog in the fight to demonstrate that debunk the claims of prevailing wage proponents, you need to only look at your own knowledge base or intuition to determine this is so. Buyers love competition. Sellers hate competition. And that's whether they're sellers of labor with fixed contracts or fixed prices with government fixed pricing, or whether they're the contractors that do it. Reduced competition is what the proponents of prevailing wage are selling. Don't buy their flawed arguments. That concludes my testimony. Stand prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Representative Smith?
To inquire, Mr. Chair. To inquire. Just a quick question. I heard free market a few times. Like, what's your definition of free market? Is it just here in Missouri? Is it nationwide? Is it international?
Free market is free market wherever you find it. It's unrestricted by government intervention in price fixing, price setting, manipulating the labor supply, manipulating the incentives for labor to work. That's what free market is.
So if you and I are both carpenters, same skill level, Representative Love has a job, if you want to charge, if I want to charge $30 an hour, and you want to charge 10, you should get it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. What if you currently are on food stamps and living in subsidized housing? Should you still get that job over me?
No.
Okay. Why is that? Because you're being
No, because I don't think there's any favoritism applied in the free market. The free market is based on competitive events.
I know, but if you're being subsidized indirectly by the government with your housing, maybe school for your children, health care from the darn Obamacare, you're getting all of this. And I'm not. I'm paying for it from the wages I make. Should you still?
The wage independent of any kind of environment should be free market.
Okay, so but that's hard to determine though, because you can't.
Although there's lots of collective corruption in our system, and when I talk about collective corruption, I'm not talking about illegal corruption. I'm talking about legal corruption. And prevailing wage is a legal corruption.
But
by law, it's allowed, but it is still corrupting the free market system.
How do you stop the illegal portion in the free market? So if I come out of some state and I may have undocumented workers who fled to this country because they were being terrorized, and if I give them a bowl of rice and a cup of water, and they'll say, hey, I'll do anything for you, I'm bringing that to the table. And you're paying taxes and doing it the right way. How can you stop that corruption?
I don't really understand your question, but I will say this, that the free market should determine wage rate.
Okay, and I guess what I'm saying is it's in my opinion not that pure, because the free market has been corrupted in a sense.
It has always. So I'll agree with you that in many respects, mostly by government intervention in the marketplace, such as prevailing wage laws.
Okay, and I think through contractors doing slick stuff to get like free labor, but okay, we can agree on that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Farmer's Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ellis, you remember the show Green Acres?
I do.
What was your opinion of that? I mean, what was the basic premise of that show?
You're asking me to reach back in the long place.
I'll tell you what
I asked for breakfast.
Mr. Douglas, the attorney that wore suits, that had lived in New York, with his wife, who was from New York, decided that he wanted to move to the farm and live with the rural people, downsize, so to speak, live a simpler life. He chose to do that. He wanted to do that. Now, do you think he made as much money in Hooterville as he did in New York City?
Well, I doubt in Hooterville, they set the price of wage.
Right, but he chose to do that because that's what he wanted to do. When you look in this room today, I see a lot of people here from St. Louis and maybe Kansas City. I'm not sure where they're from, but I don't see, other than maybe myself, anyone here from Hooterville.
But let me.
Why is that? Why would that be? Why is that in this conversation? Why is this conversation went from a labor issue to a urban-rural issue? And that's really what we're doing here. That's really what we're dealing with.
Well, I really think that you'll see a lot of proponents of prevailing wage in the room, and probably not many people that are opposed to prevailing wage in the room. Why is that? Why does that happen? Economists call that concentrated benefits versus dispersed costs. Concentrated benefits, when you have a concentrated benefits, like government is going to spend $1 million here on this little project, you'll have a lot of people that are seeking to get that $1 million come in and advocate for it. But the dispersed costs are that you have 1 million taxpayers going to pay $1. They ain't going to take the time to come argue against this kind of an intervention in the free marketplace. So it's that old concentration of benefits versus dispersed costs that gets all of the proponents of prevailing wage in an uproar because they have much to gain from prevailing wage. But you don't see the people that you're going to go send a dollar bill to, say, I'm reducing your wages by $1 so I can fund this prevailing wage for these people. You don't see that because they can't afford to come up here and argue that point for that little of a reduction in their income.
We also heard the discrepancy or the difference in the schools and the property tax. We've heard that here today. And quite frankly, I get just a little bit offended when I hear that because we know that St. Louis and Kansas City are the economic drivers of the state. We know that. But we also know that rural Missouri feeds the state. And if people wanted to pay $8 a gallon for a gallon of milk, that's probably where it should be compared to the actual market if you look at inflation. But I don't think anybody in St. Louis wants to do that. So there's a lot of reasons that the wages aren't as much in rural Missouri. And there's a lot of reasons that we don't pay the property tax. But still, I think if we continue down that road of having the mentality that our state, that rural Missouri isn't important or doesn't produce as much revenue or whatever, I don't think that's the road we need to be going down. We know that it takes the whole state to make this state work. Would you agree with that?
I will say there's lots of intervention in the marketplace in the cities where tax credits go to build a stadium or help build a stadium, the rest of the state pays for it. I couldn't calculate all of the impact of interventions. I can have a grasp of the understanding that if you free up the market, what can happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hillis. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to hear from Denise Hasty, please.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The AGC of Missouri is opposed to this bill for many of the reasons that's already been outlined in previous statement, although we do take exception with the proposed changes to definitions of construction and maintenance. As all of you are aware, MoDOT's budget is in dire straits, and the way we read the definition of construction and maintenance, most if not all of the existing MoDOT budget could fall outside of the definition of prevailing wage. So with that, I'll be brief.
Thank you very much. Representative Burns.
Permission to inquire. So you're here reporting prevailing wage. A gentleman before was reporting the free market society. A couple of terms were said in there. Number one, of living. And that's what this is all about. We're talking about standard of living, all that free market society, what's sent our jobs, what you go through in Missouri. One of the reasons their schools are down in their taxes, because those jobs, those shoe factory jobs, a lot of those manufacturing jobs are in China now. That's the free market. Is that what we're trying to do to this country, make us China? Because it sure looks like it to me. And I've lived a long time, and I've lived through a lot of these things. Keep those wages down. If that were true, it wouldn't be down predominantly, and our CEOs wouldn't be making 500 and 600 times the amount that their factory workers are making if they're blessed enough to still have a job in this country. So I think it's time we start looking at America as a job provider and jobs kept in America. And you don't do that by continually cutting wages. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Terry Briggs, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Terry Briggs, I'm a registered lobbyist for the Site Improvement Association. We're an association of contractors, mostly in subcontracting business. We're opposed to this particular piece of legislation that the representative sponsored. I'm not going to bore you with all the details from the previous opposition, so I'll just leave my written testimony here. I will say that we do think that if you give enough time, you will see the wages, as Mr. Fall alluded to, start to go down or to adjust themselves, not necessarily go down, but to adjust themselves to more accurately reflect what is in the local areas. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Senator Green, are you still here? Didn't see you back there.
Thank you once again. I'm here representing over 220 electrical contractors from the eastern side of the state in opposition to this bill. I will be brief, but just to add a few things for the history. In the mid-1930s, there were several United States elected officials, Davis and Bacon, that came up with the idea, and they were actually Republicans, and the people pushing the issue was the construction industry. It was not the labor movement or labor unions. A lot of the contractors, as was stated before, from the South were underbidding on federal projects, contractors from the northeastern side of the United States. So they said, we need to set some type of wage rate so that we can compete in our own backyard. And then in 1958, the state of Missouri followed suit. The one thing that is different in the public sector as opposed to the private sector we have to keep in light of is it is required under state law and federal law that when it comes to construction, you go with the lowest responsible. There is no definition in our Missouri statutes of responsive and responsible, and everyone knows what the definition of the lowest is. So the reason the prevailing wage law is there is so that contractors in that region can compete. Now, another area you do not see too much of in the political subdivision area is there is no requirement to go with the lowest responsible when a school district or a municipality is hiring legal counsel. There is no requirement state statute to go with the lowest responsible when a school district or a municipality is going for an architect or engineering firm. But when it comes to construction and the contractors, the political subdivision has that requirement. So one of the reasons the construction industry and the contractors have always been supportive of prevailing wage is it sets a local wage rate, whether it's union or non-union. But it was not the labor unions that created these state statutes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hefner?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Raymond Hefner. I'm a registered lobbyist representing the Plumbing Industry Council, the Missouri Association of Plumbing Heating Fluid Contractors, and the Sheet Metal Contractors Association of St. Louis. Would like to go on record in opposition to this bill. I would urge you to take a look at the report that I left previously. It does not only focus on West Virginia. It hits a number of the contiguous states in the state of Missouri about the economic benefits of prevailing wage for the state. With that, I will leave my testimony and answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McBride.
Again, Adam McBride, registered lobbyist, representing roughly 14,000 construction craft laborers throughout the state of Missouri. As the chairman knows, I don't like to repeat things that have been said before. I don't think anybody cares for that. There are two things that I think that we haven't really addressed. One is, in fact, the wage survey system that the federal government, this bill prescribes that we look at. Bureau of Labor Statistics randomly, and it's not even annually, on a random basis, they'll send out a voluntary wage survey by industry. We're talking secretaries, construction workers, housekeepers, janitors. It's across all sectors and all industries. It is voluntary. The other main thing to keep in mind about the wage survey system, this metro and non-metro from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it does not ask nor does it want any information on benefits. So the wage rate, from however few do get filled out and submitted back to the federal, the federal government, has absolutely zero benefit data at all. Even if it were an open shop contractor, let's say as a matching 401k plan, there is no space for that to be submitted. Versus our state system, which doesn't take into account any fringe benefits that may or may not be paid. I ran through a couple, and the only other thing that I really wanted to note is, based on actuarials for our fringe benefit program outside of St. Louis, so this is our outstate health and welfare program, they base their long-term projections on the average construction worker works roughly 1,600 hours in a year. Your average full-time, 5-day a week, 40-hour week employee, 52 weeks a year, 2,080. Roughly 400 fewer hours due to weather or due to demand or due to any number of things that come with working in an industry like the construction industry. So if you take some of these, and he's done his homework, he's got them. I only have for myself, which is the laborers. So based on 1,600 hours, if you buy that, and I do, these people are paying a lot of money and they're a lot smarter than me to come up with that figure. In Berry County, for example, I pulled 4 different counties that this bill would impact. In Berry County, the BLS wage would be $12.36 an hour for a laborer. It's $19,776 a year. So under this act, that would be the current wage rate for a general laborer in Berry County. St. Clair County, which I believe is your home county, $15.42 an hour. It's actually a little higher than most of them are. That would be $24,672 annually. $24,600 annually would be what that construction worker on average would make. I shall disagree with you on that, Representative. Scotland County, Northeast Missouri, $14.07. That's $22,512 per year. Mississippi County, $14.45, roughly the same, $23,120 a year. That's what the prevailing wage would be set in those counties. Versus where we are now. And again, if we want to talk just on the check, we're looking at $32,000, Berry County, $20,000, St. Clair. St. Clair County, actually, the current system to prove that it works, the current state's prevailed rate for St. Clair County is $12.75 an hour. And when those wages were submitted, presumably, I can guarantee they weren't from any wages that we had and were able to submit. There were no fringe benefits at all. Yep, I can show you right here. Yep. Nope, that's statement. That's for the laborers, general labor. So if I were, I was. That's what I stated. That's correct.
Representative.
Yeah. My numbers are good. Trust me. Scotland County, 33,000. Mississippi County, 33. St. Clair, 20,400. That's under our current system on the check. Plus, in most instances, there are some fringe benefits, which at the high water mark for any of those counties would get an individual up to, that would be Scotland County, with $12 in benefits on top of $21 an hour. He'd make $53,000 a year before taxes. So we go from 53, it's total package, not what he sees on the check. It provides that man, presumably, some health insurance, dental and vision coverage, okay? What he sees on the check, though, what he brings home to feed his family is $33,000. This would then bring that down to 22. I just wanted to make sure that if we're a body that values benefits, that values health insurance instead of Medicaid, that values pension for retirement, supplement, our Social Security system, whatever it is, I think that's fundamentally the question that we have when we look at some of these bills that's been before this committee. Is A, what types of jobs do we want? What types? Do we want jobs that provide benefits or have the means? But keep in mind, a lot of people think this is in it. I think I'm getting my clock here. The non-union construction worker who, say the contractor, it's an open shop, bids and wins, they get that total package on the check. Whereas my man gets that, and that money goes into his benefit program because that's what he's decided he wants that money to go to. But a non-union guy actually gets all that on the check. That's the guy that's really going to feel a massive impact. I mean, we will hurt, don't get me wrong, but your open shop construction worker who probably dominates a lot of rural areas, he's the one that's going to feel it more than anybody. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the indulgence. If anyone has any questions, I'm available.
Thank you, sir. Are there others here to testify in opposition to this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Nancy Giddens, Construction Employers Coalition, and the Carpenters District Council did await Mr. McBride's comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there others to testify in support of the bill? You'll get your chance.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Michael Brode appearing on behalf of the Missouri School Boards Association. We just see this as an opportunity for us to potentially reduce costs on some of those construction projects that we do have. Since all construction costs for schools in the state of Missouri, as opposed to some other states, are borne locally. There's no state funds that go into those construction costs. So, it's a legislation.
Thank you, sir. Are there others to testify against the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representatives, I'm David Claridge today, appearing on behalf of the Mechanical Contractors Associations of Kansas City and St. Louis. Normally, I would just go on record in speaking in opposition to this legislation, as I think the witnesses in opposition thus far have certainly enumerated many of the reasons why you should seriously consider whether or not this policy change is meritorious. I would like to juxtapose these two bills that you just heard, though, 285 and 195, very briefly. And that is, you were told just a few moments ago by Representative White that where there's prevailing wage, there's higher costs, higher government accountability for those costs with poorer construction. You were told just a moment ago on 195 that where there's no prevailing wage, that there's lower cost, no government accountability with good construction. Representative Fraker, let me just suggest that the reason why Hooterville should be concerned about why St. Louis and Kansas City are here is that in many cases, the nature of the business that might be required in Hooterville might require us. And that means that we have to be able to go and provide a quality workforce for a high-tech service. If Hooterville decides to put in a nuclear power plant, they might want us. And so I would just suggest that prevailing wage has its purpose. And since the time of the Empire State Building, as Senator Green noted, there have been reasons why prevailing wage was put in place in order to protect the educated workforce and its ability to be provided on a local level. Not always, although you might prefer local employees to provide local labor, you might not be able to acquire that local labor locally. You might have to go elsewhere. And thus, many of the people that I represent, the companies and individuals, travel not only within the St. Louis region or the Kansas City region, but throughout the state and in some cases throughout this nation, because of the level of quality of workforce that they provide. So, Mr. Chairman and Representatives, I would strongly encourage your objection to this legislation, and I would be more than happy to address Jaja and Douglas's concern.
Thank you, but that won't be necessary. How about that testifying for informational purposes?
Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Hunter Jebel. I'm from Columbia, Missouri. I represent no special interest. I'd like to think of myself as representing the taxpayer, which I'm one, for just benefit of those who are. My wife and I did build a house in Columbia, and I have worked blue-collar jobs in the past. I believe I am here in order to support the point of view that prevailing wage legislation should be abolished. And I would like to do that from a common sense point of view, without the distractions of immigrant labor or other things that are government accountability, which are beside the point. Now, the first thing that I noticed thinking about prevailing wage is what is meant by wage. We're talking about an hourly rate, are we not? Yet, we have heard up to this point that it's very simple to take this hourly rate, multiply it by 2,000 hours a year, and come up with an annual income. Well, I submit that there is a big difference between an hourly rate and annual income, particularly in an industry like the construction industry, where there is widespread unemployment. Now, we've heard testimony that I think is incontrovertible that prevailing wage legislation increased costs to government entities. Excuse me. And it seems to me that where costs are increased, there will be certain consequences. If you increase the cost of labor artificially by fiat, by government legislation and regulation, are you not expecting to see lower employment or fewer hours of employment in the course of a year's time? Or let's put it more concretely. When I was installing burglar alarms, would I rather have a $20 an hour job 3/4 of the year or an $18 an hour job full-time? Families do not live on hourly wages. They live on annual income. And that's what we're talking about, income. As has been expressed before, prevailing wage is essentially a tax on government passed on to the taxpayers. What is received in return is less, smaller school buildings, smaller senior citizen centers. Now, I'm prepared to talk about the University of Kansas City study, recent study supporting the benefits of prevailing wage legislation. We can do that. We can get into some weeds about that. But I just ask you to think about it. The prevailing wage has so many benefits. Wouldn't we all want to extend it to other areas? In other words, if there are any principles involved here, they should apply to every industry, right? So, prevailing wage goes back to 1891. It's the first in a long series of labor laws that have become enmeshed and impossible, almost impossible to separate out in any academic study or any session such as the one we have here. In 1891, local feelings were very strong, us versus them. The company in Long Island did not cotton to bringing in workers from Alabama, black ones. Exaggerated that threat, came up with the idea of prevailing wage that became the Davis-Bacon law. I would just mention that at those times, there was no minimum wage. There was no social safety net. After prevailing wage, we have minimum wage. Talks about living wage. I would stress again that there is no living wage. There's a living income. There's not a living wage because a lot of wages are come from part-time people, like school teachers working in the summer in the construction industry. So what am I getting at? we have a lot of labor legislation that has not really produced prosperity. We have seen in the last 6 years, government attempts to manipulate the labor market. It failed. Let me conclude with, if there are any questions about the University of Kansas City study, the effects of that study, I'll be glad to talk about them. Any questions? Well, let me conclude by saying this, that what we see with labor legislation and other kinds of legislation, similar legislation, is that government seems to think that it is its purpose to correspond to cater to every special interest. And if you just get all of the special interests taken care of, well, you'll serve the general interest. That's fallacious. Not all the special interests can be catered to or taken care of, and they're not taken care of equally. I believe certain people who testified here would say that the construction industry is somehow different, somehow more deserving of special care. I dispute that. Some people have talked about what's fair. Fair is subjective. It varies. We have different opinions. However many people we have here, we have probably that many plus one or two different ideas of what's fair. Is it the government's business to impose its idea, the idea of a majority of legislators, of what's fair on the rest of people, interfering with their individual decisions, how they take care of their family income, whether it's full-time or part-time income? So I would submit that serving a special interest damages the general interest. I'll be glad to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, sir. With that, we conclude House Bill 195. I'm sorry, were you on the list to testify for, against, or in opposition?
Against.
Okay, make it very brief. I have another bill to.
My name is Bruce Wax. I from Florissant, Missouri. I'm also a member of the Painters Union. I've lived in the state of Missouri for, well, I'd say 46 years, but I spent 7 years in the United States Army. Opponents of the prevailing wage statute argue that the repeal of the prevailing wage statute would save dollars on construction costs and would bolster state, local, and county revenue streams. Opponents of prevailing wage statute argue that prevailing wage laws increase the cost of public construction due to the impact of higher wage rates on total construction costs. Opponents of prevailing wage statute argue that by exempting school construction from the prevailing wage statute, 4 schools could be built for the price of 3 schools. Some opponents of the prevailing wage statute argue that the prevailing wage statute decreases minority participation and female participation in and on-job training and apprenticeship programs in the construction trades. In my opinion, labor costs are not the dominant cost in government construction contracts. Even including benefit and payroll taxes, labor costs are roughly 20 to 30% of the construction contracts. If labor costs are 25% of the total cost and prevailing wage rules raise wages by 10%, the impact of the contract cost would be no more than 2.5%. Thus, even if there's an increase in contract cost, it is likely to be too small to point or being undetectable in some instances. My opinion, in any introduction or advancement of legislation to address this issue will be unsuccessful and detriment to our state by dealing with the 20 to 30% cost and not realizing what needs to be addressed in the 70 to 80% of the cost. Many opponents will tell us that labor cost is a problem, but let us be reminded the local economy, the state economy benefit from public works dollars through increases in sales tax and corporate tax revenue, and ensuring the construction of Missouri remains a highly trained occupation capable of producing quality construction. Taking wages out of the equation forces contractors to compete on a basis of efficiency. There's a ton of research that shows repealing prevailing wage leads to lower quality construction, increased costs, overruns, and unscrupulous contractors. We must keep contractors competing on efficiency and not beating each other out of the contracts by beating the workforce out of its wages and or the state out of its tax revenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind everyone that they need to complete a witness form for their testimonies. At this point in time, that concludes House Bill 195. We'll now hear House Bill 257. Representative Dohrman, go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Tony Duggar. I represent the 141st District, which is Bragg County in the eastern half of Webster County. Thank you very much for hearing my House Bill 257 today. The provisions in 257 would include school districts in counties without a charter form of government. They can vote to exempt themselves from prevailing wage requirements. The provisions do not apply to school districts in the counties of Jackson, St. Charles, St. Louis, and Jefferson. These exemptions apply to constructions and maintenance work done for the school district. Upon the vote of the school district, they must notify the Division of Labor Standards of their action that they've taken. The rationale behind this bill would be that it would allow school districts the ability to make infrastructure improvements without worrying about the high cost of prevailing wage. It would be, the most impact would be in the rural areas where labor costs are lower. The bill doesn't require the schools to change their policy, and it leaves it up to local control by a majority of the vote of the local school board. So it's a small bill. That's what it does in a nutshell. I would be glad to answer any questions.
Questions of the bill sponsor? Representative Weber.
Wow, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You said that this bill will predominantly affect rural areas, and this has been a theme that has been going on for the last couple hours about urban wages versus rural wages. In 2013, Republican majority passed a bill that revamps the way prevailing wage is calculated, and when they did, they said this bill will more accurately reflect wages of rural areas. Do you believe that bill that the Republican majority passed is working, or do you think it's not working?
Well, I mean, it's helping some, yes, but this bill will help even more.
But if it's helping some, if it's accurately reflecting the rural wages, then your bill won't make any more difference, more or less difference, depending on where it is.
I don't know about that. I think this bill will make a bigger impact.
Why?
Because I think it specifically sets out what it will do for schools. And it will in return put more money in the classrooms.
But why will it make a bigger difference in rural areas?
Because the wages in rural areas are not as high as they are.
Right, which is why you passed the bill in 2013 to fix that. And if your bill worked, then it shouldn't be an issue.
I said it worked somewhat. I said this bill I think will even work better.
Okay. I guess my last. This bill, you said it only applies to schools, and it only does apply to schools. But it's not the first bill that we've heard today. Right? We heard a bill that just was calculated, and also to changing the definition of major construction and repairs. And we've got a bill that just applies to schools. So you see how we look at this in the aggregate. Through all the bills today, you're basically trying to totally revamp prevailing wage.
Gentlemen, I'm only speaking on behalf of my bill today. So I haven't heard the other two, so I don't know. I'm just presenting my bill today.
Right, and that's the strategy that you guys always employ. You always have one person do one little piece, and that person is just doing a little piece, and they're not doing anything else. But the sum is that you're totally revamping prevailing wage.
Is that a question or a statement?
I think it's probably more of a statement, but do you understand my frustration on that?
Do you understand the frustration in the rural areas where we're having to deal with this issue?
Why are you, and this is where I was going to let it go, but you went back there. What do you mean, deal with what issue?
The wages in the rural areas are not as high as they are in the other areas, and so we're
Everybody agrees with that.
We're stuck paying the prevailing wage that relates to the higher areas.
Which you passed a fix for that. You voted for a fix for that in 2013. And then you're coming back and saying that it's not working, that the bill you passed is not working?
I'm saying, gentlemen, that this bill will help.
But you said that
if you support the last bill, this bill is better.
I wasn't for the last bill.
Okay, then you probably won't be for this one.
Okay, gentlemen, I want you to understand, and I don't know, I mean, I know that you're not going to acknowledge this, but I want everybody in the committee to understand, the entire day we've been talking about urban and rural wages. This Republican majority has passed a prevailing wage bill 2 sessions ago to address that issue. So you have to admit either that bill you passed is a failure or this is not a problem. You can't have it both ways. That bill can't work and this still be a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Dohrman?
Thank you. To inquire, Mr. Chairman? Thank you, Representative. Bottom line, to make this simple, this bill would allow the rural school districts to get more for their dollar?
That would be correct. It would allow them to have more dollars to spend in the classroom.
So, I don't think you were here. We had a comment earlier that some cities are tired of subsidizing the rural area. So this would help alleviate that problem, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this stop the bidding process in any way of a school? I mean, when schools, put together, their addition or whatever they want with that school, anyone could bid on this, correct?
That's correct.
I mean, the scope of work, the quality of the work they want, the materials that they have lined out that they want, to the minute detail would still be in effect for this job. And these jobs would still go under inspection all along the way to ensure proper installation and quality control, correct?
I believe that's correct.
So anyone can bid on any type of job that falls within the scope of this bill, correct? It would just make it to where anybody is eligible to win the bid. Am I correct? They wouldn't have to curtail in more wage money. This would be a savings, and that contractor puts together that bid, correct? I mean, he's not being forced, right? Right. So this is a free market bill. I don't get the argument. I really don't. I'm a contractor. I have to bid on these jobs, and I have to put in what I think it's going to take, and to the scope of work directed by an architect and by the contractor that's putting forth the job. That's what I just don't get about this argument. So I appreciate the bill, and I hopefully we can move this even further. So thank you.
Representative Smith, go ahead.
So this is a cost issue. How many school districts there are that would be affected by this? Because it's just carving out St. Louis County, Jackson,
St. Charles, and Jefferson.
Okay. What about St. Louis City? Are they get caught up in the mix?
I believe they're carved out as well.
So this is impacting a whole lot of school districts. So from here, Callaway County, Cole County, some districts with Boone County, nice population there. So I looked at a statistic one time, and it was talking about school districts in Missouri, and there's like hundreds of them. There's like 400, maybe 500 school districts. What about consolidation of some of those districts to bring down costs, and then you wouldn't have to cut into the pay of the people in the community that are working on it? You think that'd be a good fix to?
I don't know.
I mean, we were talking about costs, and I'm just trying to see maybe that'd be easier, or if we I know in a lot of those districts, the highest paid person is that superintendent. There's a lot of superintendents making a lot of money. So if we somehow limited the amount of money that they made, maybe that could save with the maintenance costs. Would you be agreeable to that?
Gentlemen, again, this is a local control issue, and I would leave all of that up to the local board.
Okay, because I don't see how the prevailing wage issue helps again. We seem to be coming after the man and woman that are working, just trying to make a living, and we want to cut into their pay, but not doing anything with limiting how much a contractor can make off this contract as far as profit, or anything with consolidation of the school districts, because I think 400 or 500 is a whole lot, or limiting the superintendent pay. Now going back to the prevailing wage, it's the county. So in the county, if they turn in the sheets, that's what sets the wage rate. Is that how it works?
I believe that's correct.
So are they not turning in the? I mean, if that's the prevailing wage, are you saying that's too high even for the county? So if everybody in Mississippi County turns in their sheet for all their wage classifications,
But are they turning them in?
Maybe that's the issue. You know, I don't know if this will fix that. Maybe there's something. I learned a new word like nefarious. Maybe there's something nefarious happening with these contractors. That's big word to them. Yeah, it's a big word, but I'm just trying to understand.
I don't quite follow your line of question.
I'm just trying to understand why are we coming after the working men and women, and we're not looking at anything else with these rural districts as far as consolidation or limiting pay of people that are making a whole lot of money, and why aren't these contractors turning in these sheets? So that all applies to the bill. Do you have any insight on any of that?
Gentlemen, I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Fraker. Go ahead.
Inquire, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Gentlemen, you and I share a county. We're neighbors. That's correct. And you have about 3,500 Amish in your district.
That's correct also.
Which is about 10% of your constituent base.
Yes.
Is Amish. Now these Amish pay taxes, don't they? They pay property taxes.
Yes, they do.
And 84%, I think, in our county of the property tax goes to the schools, correct?
That's correct.
However, they don't attend our schools, do they?
They do not.
So those Amish are in our district. They're buying groceries at our grocery stores. They're shopping in our towns. They're providing their taxes, paying taxes just like we do. They don't use our schools. However, we can't hire them and use them in our school districts to help if we need something done, can we? So with this bill, would this bill allow us to hire an Amish to come and paint a schoolroom for us if we wanted them to?
Sure.
Fantastic.
Definitely would.
You know, there's some good craftsmen out there. They do a lot of good work. And they deserve that opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jim Fall, would you like to testify? Or quick questions? Make it very quick.
Thank you, Representative, for being here. And I know that you spend a lot of time in government service, city clerk, that kind of thing. So you were involved in some kind of bidding processes, I would assume.
County clerk, gentlemen.
County clerk, I'm sorry. Okay. Have you ever served on a board of education?
I have not.
Okay. So you're more or less in the government end of it rather than the education end of it? Okay. And I'm only speaking from the experiences that I had from a school board and a college board point of view. What happens, we had to instill a thing on both of those called the lowest, most responsible bid. And where that came from was government bids, the lowest bid. Imagine the guys going up in that space capsule And that's the lowest bidder, what they're thinking. I hope they built this right. Or the Marines that stormed Iwo Jima, which, by the way, today is the 70th anniversary of raising flag, the Marines raising the flag of Iwo Jima. That they're, right, you better believe it. God bless you too. That their weapons work correctly. Well, because shoddy, and when I say shoddy workmanship, you're behind a wall, it's hard to see that, or a boiler job. But when those start failing after 5 years, so when I come on this board, all these things are failing, and I said, we can't do this because you're trying to conserve as much money as possible for a school district, what you're talking about, rural, city, any place, because you're producing the future of this world, our children. And as I look at the statistics here, superintendents at the Wright City R2 school district, Warren County R3 school district, make a competitive wage with any other superintendent in the state, in the city, in the county that I live in. And that's right, because you want the most responsible person governing over your school district. And that's what happens when you get away from a competitive bidding situation where someone has prevailing wage to protect and all the work that they're going to do. We also, the most responsible, it was our school district attorney that brought that in, because we would go back and check, like if it's a drywall contractor or a pipe, whoever it is, work behind them, give us references so we can check on your work. They might be the lowest bid, but they weren't the most responsible. And so what happens is a school district, particularly rural, will spend twice as much money to get the job done correctly the second time. And that's what happens. That's why these prevailing wage and all these laws were brought into effect to protect taxpayers and to protect students and the school district. That's why you never want to get in a lawsuit with a school district, because you may win, but you'll spend $4 or $5 million. That takes money away from the education of the children. So my point to you is, from what you've explained to me, and in all due respect, all three of these bills today have not produced any evidence where top quality workmanship is going to be done in any school district, predominantly school districts, or any government entity in a rural area or county area or city area that's going to save money and get the most and the most positive, most responsible work done, so you don't have to go back and do it twice. And that's my objection to all three of these bills. I mean, it's not personal. This is business, not personal. But, and I don't think anybody's really thinking about that when you get involved in our children's education, and money should go into educating the children, not redoing a project. And how do you go back after a contractor that may be here today, and when it talked about disasters, terrible things that happen, notorious that they come into a community from anything. And that's my objection to your bill. And I present that to you respectfully, but that's my objection. If you'd like to comment on that, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Jim Fall, would you like to testify?
Just briefly on behalf of the Missouri AFL-CIO and the building construction trade, as Representative Weber pointed out, that again is this law, current prevailing wage law, is just 2 years old. Ironically enough, the current prevailing wage law started out as this exact bill, and the legislature found to make the changes apply across the state as currently reflected in the prevailing wage law. As far as local control, this act does not provide for anybody for a school district that is opted out to then opt back in, so if they so wish, which it would end prevailing wage completely for a school district with no avenue to return to it if a school board either decided that they had made a decision they weren't happy with, or a new school board was elected to go into. Again, then for all the reasons previously given for the last two bills, which as an attorney I like to incorporate my reference, I would oppose this bill. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to sit down so we can get some lunch.
Thank you, sir. Denise Hasty. Terry Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Terry Briggs, registered lobbyist for the Site Improvement Association in opposition to the bill. We've already gone through everything. I'll keep it short and simple. Most of mine's on the written testimony. If you have to answer any questions. I was a little confused as the statement why the Amish couldn't bid on public school work though. If they had a company, any company would be allowed to bid on those public school projects. I'm not quite sure I followed that logic, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Senator Green?
Opposition. You like that one?
Thank you, sir. Raymond Hefner?
I don't think I can outdo Senator Green's opposition.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McBride, you're going to get your chance after all.
Hey, I've already turned my form in, just for the record, with the laborers were opposed.
Thank you, sir. Are there others in opposition?
Honorable Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Bruce Holt with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, representing Kansas City and St. Louis, and I represent the borders, and we'll testify in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee, Michelle Scott Huffman with Missouri National Education Association, and we're just here to go on record in opposition to the bill.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, David Parrish, here on behalf of the Mechanical Contractors Association of St. Louis and Kansas City.
Any others? Anyone here to testify for informational purposes? Or are there those in favor of it?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Lodewigan, testifying today on behalf of the Missouri Association of Rural Education. Go on record in favor of this bill. I think you've heard a lot of conversation today about rural versus urban and whatnot, and particularly reference to the bill that was passed years ago. What we hear from our rural districts is that the relief hasn't made it there yet, and maybe it's coming. But as of right now, that relief has not gotten to the local taxpayers. And so, in the meantime, this is the bill that's been put forward. I want to talk about a little bit of what we heard about rural versus urban. I think there is there's something that I would like to remind the committee within this foundation formula, which was created in 2006, which did create a small schools grant. However, it did take into consideration that in certain areas of the state, it is more expensive to educate students. And that was the rest of us for the dollar value modifier. As we look at some of the arguments against this, particularly looking at superintendent salaries and whatnot, I think that actually makes a point that we're looking for local, that a lot of districts are looking for the local control to determine what the best rate is to pay for labor or work. For instance, the per pupil expenditure from just 2 school districts in the state, Kirkwood in St. Louis County to Ava in Southwest Missouri, almost $12,000 for Kirkwood, $8,000 in Ava. About an increase of 30%, or a difference of 30%. I just think that there is a difference between the rates that are being paid in urban areas versus rural, and I think that needs to be reflected in the rates that are being paid for work on the construction side as well. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
None appearing. I will proceed to close this hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who come to committee hearings and regularly, in order to manage our time for testimonies, we need our witnesses to sign up. So please make use of these sign-up sheets. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for that. I'll do so in the future. Michael Grote, appearing on behalf of the Missouri School Boards Association. Essentially, again, we look at this as a cost savings opportunity for us, and I think maybe as you heard before, maybe it hasn't reached some of our rural districts yet, and we've seen that Mr. Chairman, actually in your district with Anderson, they recently believed that they have lost the opportunity for the construction of 3 classrooms in their recent construction projects simply due to prevailing wage costs. So maybe it's coming, maybe that relief is coming for some of these smaller communities. But when it comes down to local dollars being used exclusively for construction, that's a burden on schools when we are short funding.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Representative Hurst.
Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, and I didn't say anything earlier, but now that I've heard from there's the NEA and different education. Are we helping education or are we hurting here? I mean, there's opposed and there's for. Maybe you could explain it to me. Why would the NEA be against it?
I can't speak to the NEA. They have their membership. We have ours. Right now, the Missouri School Boards Association, we have a resolution in regard to trying to find ways to save costs for construction. So I'm here to speak on behalf of the resolutions that our members have.
Fair enough. And I apologize for not listening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Others? Ladies and gentlemen, again, this closes hearing on House Bill 257. Thank you very much for coming.